Hello, everyone. We got a big UFC card coming up tomorrow. It is the premiere of Fight Island in Abu Dhabi. Who would have thought it would have been possible? We heard Dana White talk about it a few months ago. There was going to be a secret Fight Island because in the midst of all of this COVID, he was having a hard time setting up fights pretty much everywhere. So he said, I'm going to build a private island, put an octagon there, put an arena there, have housing and food and workout facilities for all the fighters. It's going to be a self-contained fight island. So that way the UFC can continue to host events during this whole epidemic. So first off, thank you, Dana White. This is absolutely awesome. I have been starving for MMA. We haven't had a big fight card in a while. And tomorrow we got three title fights all in one night. So it's a pretty big night of fights. I'm going to go over the 5 fights on the main card, give you a breakdown, give you my pick. If you want, you could take out a home mortgage loan. You could bet the house, bet all of your money on my picks. Well, actually, don't do that because I actually don't have a very good history of getting these fights right because it's really, really tough. When you have people swinging punches, trying to knock each other out with 4-ounce gloves, kneeing each other in the face and kicking each other in the head, it's a really tough thing to predict. But I will try my best, and I will use all my MMA knowledge. I've been following the sport for a long time, and I will use the knowledge that I have to the best of my ability to break down these fights and give you an accurate pick based off evidence that we have seen, based off their other fights. So that way we can kind of at least give a good analysis of how the skills of each fighter should match up against each other. So first fight on the main card is Paige Vanzant versus Amanda Revis. I had first seen Paige Vanzant. I saw her fight live. This was back in 2014. I was in Las Vegas. This was the night that Conor McGregor had dethroned Jose Aldo, one of the biggest fight nights in UFC history, and it was 3 UFC cards back to back to back. It was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday thing in Las Vegas. This was one of the biggest weekends of fights ever in UFC history. I was there sitting cage side watching Paige Vanzant fight. She was fighting Rose Namajunas, who later went on to become a champion. We just didn't realize how good Rose was at the time. I think the betting odds were probably about even for that fight back in 2014. But one thing I can tell you is Paige Vanzant is unbelievably tough. She is not just good looking. A lot of people see her. She's posting now. She's a big Instagram star. She went on Dancing with the Stars and made a bunch of money. Got a lot of publicity from that as well because she's incredibly good looking. We don't usually expect a female fighter who puts on gloves and a mouthpiece that goes in there and tries to cause physical harm to other women to be so good looking. Paige Vanzant has it all. She's good at talking, looks good, and fights pretty good too, right? She is insanely tough. I remember she had her head split open by Rose Namajunas, and she has absolutely no quit in her. And, I mean, some of these submission attempts, too, by Rose, I mean, at certain points, she had her arm just bending back in the wrong direction. She wouldn't tap. So, I mean, she is incredibly tough. Amanda Ribas, 9-1 in the UFC. I mean, I haven't seen her fight before, so, I mean, this is a tough breakdown. Let me see how many UFC fights she's had. Okay, so, yeah, she's had 3 UFC fights, has a win over Emily Whitmere, Mackenzie Dern, Randa Marcos, all by decision. So her last, well, no, not all by decision. The last 2 fights she had, she won by decision. Her UFC debut, she won by rear naked choke against Emily Whitmere. The rest of her wins leading up to the UFC were mostly all finishes, but you see this all the time where you have fighters that came from small organizations and their record is just filled with finishes. Sometimes you get all these knockouts in the first round. They come to the UFC and they're in decision. Now they're trying to just squeak out decisions, and that's just what happens when the going gets tough. When you have the level of competition rise up to the talent level of the UFC, it's really tough to get these same finishes that you did earlier in your career. So, based off this, I mean, Amanda Ribas has a way better record, right? She's 9-1. Paige Vanzant is 8-4, but I'll tell you, Paige has had a lot of fights in the UFC. I mean, I think her record, I mean, if you look at Paige's record before she came to the UFC, I mean, let's see. Paige was fighting in the UFC. It was her 5th fight. Her 5th fight was in the UFC, so she's had a lot of UFC fights, so you just can't look just to record. She's been in there with world champions like Rose Namajunas, and she's been competitive. So, like I said, I mean, you got to take my prediction specifically for this fight with a grain of salt because, disclaimer, I have not seen Amanda Ribas fight. But that being said, Paige Vanzant is a handful for anyone in the division. So I'm going to say that Paige is going to win that fight. That's going to be my pick. And let's go to the next fight right here. So the next fight on the main card is Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas. It is the rematch between Rose and Jessica Andrade. If you haven't seen the first fight, it was a pretty good fight. Rose Namajunas was dominating the entire fight. She got into a position where she was, she was going for, Jessica Andrade was going for a takedown against Rose Namajunas up against the fence. Rose Namajunas had grabbed a Kimura, was using the Kimura to stop the takedown, and she ended up picking up Rose Namajunas. Rose Namajunas held on to the Kimura. She was lifted in the air and then got slammed on her head. It was a KO slam. I mean, one of the very few in UFC history. I mean, I can't think of too many slam KOs. You had the one by Rustam Khabilov. I know he suplexed someone and knocked him out. And then a long time ago, I believe Tito Ortiz had, or was it like Frank Shamrock or something? I think one of them had KO'd someone with the slam as well. So you just don't see it that often. I think it's a very low percentage win. Up until the knockout, Rose Namajunas was piecing up Jessica Andrade. When I saw that fight and I saw Jessica Andrade win, I thought it was a fluke. Just because she was getting dominated the whole fight and I felt like she just kind of pulled out a win out of her ass. So it's really hard to say that, to bet against Rose Namajunas. She was dominating the first fight. I think she will probably just dominate this fight and route to a 15-minute unanimous decision victory. And then next fight up on the main card, we have the first title fight. We have Jose Aldo versus Peter Yan. This is a pretty intriguing fight for me. I mean, Peter Yan has been on fire lately. He knocked out Uriah Faber. He has a ton of really good wins in the UFC. He's 14-1. He beat Jimmy Rivera, John Dodson. I mean, these are all pretty good wins in my opinion. Jose Aldo had first made his debut. First off, Jose Aldo doesn't have a win at 135. He had dropped down to 135 after his last fight at 145, I believe, was against the man that is going to be in the co-main event, Alexander Volkanovski. He lost a decision to Alexander Volkanovski, dropped down to 35, and he had fought Marlon Moraes, and he had lost the decision against Marlon Moraes, but Dana White just kind of treated it like a win. He saw the fight. He goes, no, I don't agree with the judges. They might have thought that Marlon Moraes won, but I think Jose Aldo won. So he actually tried to give Jose Aldo a title shot versus Henry Cejudo, and then something happened. Jose Aldo had to pull out of the fight, and then Dominic Cruz ended up coming in against Henry Cejudo. We all know the outcome of that fight. Henry Cejudo ended up KOing Dominic Cruz. But we have Jose Aldo, who I think, he looked pretty good. One thing I was surprised about in Jose Aldo's debut was his durability, because he was cutting so much weight, so it was a big question mark. Can he still absorb shots? And Marlon Moraes came out there with the leg kicks and the head kicks. They're painful to watch. Every single time he throws a head kick, I'm like, like I almost feel it through the TV screen. It's just painful to watch. Peter Yan's really well-rounded, hits like a truck, has good grappling as well. The biggest difference I've seen with Jose Aldo, though, in the last few years is he's just not that aggressive. He's just not like when we saw him against Alexander Volkanovski, he just never opened up. And even when we saw him against Marlon Moraes, he would throw a strike or two, back off. He would never just come forward. Like, do you remember the old Jose Aldo when he was fighting like Chad Mendez, or when he was even fighting Uriah Faber? He used to be aggressive, and he'd come together and throw punches and kicks and combinations. He had these lethal leg kicks, which he seems to have abandoned. He's still a really good fighter, but I believe he's just a little bit too defensive. He just doesn't put his foot on the gas, and we've seen it. I mean, we saw in the Alexander Volkanovski fight, he can be down 2-0, and there's no sense of urgency. So, and I think he's tough. I don't think he's going to get finished. I think Peter Yan's going to win a decision. And then we have Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway. I'm slightly biased. Max Holloway is one of my favorite fighters of all time. That being said, I think he clearly lost his last fight with Alexander Volkanovski. I don't think it was controversial. Don't exactly understand why they're having a rematch. Usually with the definitive victory, I would rather see the champion just move on and fight other guys. But he is rematching Max Holloway. And first off, I mean, I was pretty disappointed in that fight. I expected fireworks. It was kind of a boring fight. The fight was literally decided by leg kicks. Alexander Volkanovski landed a bunch of leg kicks. They didn't even really seem to be that hard. It was just those leg kicks where you just kind of just tap them with the foot. It made contact. It made a loud slapping noise. The judge heard Alexander Volkanovski's foot smacking against Max Holloway's leg the whole night, so they just penciled him in, and they gave him the nod in every single round, based just about, so he ended up winning that decision. I don't know what Max Holloway could have done differently, though, because Max Holloway would come forward, and Alexander Volkanovski was so good at disrupting his rhythm. I mean, it was masterful. Even though those leg kicks, I didn't see him as being that hard, he would leg kick him, and it would just kind of freeze Max Holloway for a second where he just wasn't able to get off these long combinations. You see Holloway fight so often where he starts throwing in 10 or 15 punch combinations and gets you up against the fence and just never lets you off the hook. That's the Max Holloway we're used to seeing. And he just wasn't able to be himself in that fight. And I think that had a lot to do with Alexander Volkanovski just disrupting his rhythm. He just wasn't. When Max Holloway is unable to land, when he's missing all of his shots, it screws up his rhythm. And Alexander Volkanovski was so good at making him miss. I think it's going to be a similar result. I hope it's a more exciting fight. I mean, I hope there's a little bit more aggression on both sides and we get to really see some fireworks. But I really see this as being rounds 6 through 10. I'm not overly excited about that. I think that's probably going to be another decision win for Volkanovski. And then lastly, we have the Nigerian Nightmare, Kamaru Usman, Marty Fake Newsman, whatever nickname you want to call him by, regardless of what you think his name is or what you call him. He's a fantastic fighter. I don't think there's any denying that. 16-1. And, I mean, I'm surprised that he doesn't have more finishes. I know if you look at his record, it's a lot of decisions. But, I mean, look who he's beat. I mean, he beat Colby Covington. He was the first person to ever dominate Tyron Woodley the way that he did. So, I mean, he's an extremely special fighter. I don't think there's any way that you could deny him that. Jorge Masvidal has been on this absolute tear as of late. And a lot of people see this as like a resurgence where he's just a new fighter. This isn't the same fighter that fought Damian Maia and Thompson, who fought Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He's a completely new fighter. We saw him knock out Darren Till, and he had the 5-second KO of Ben Askren and beat the shit out of Nate Diaz. But I don't think this is telling the whole story. So the big question mark in this fight is, can Jorge Masvidal stop the takedowns of Kamaru Usman? I think that most people would give the stand-up edge to Jorge Masvidal. So the question is, can he keep it on the feet? And if he can, for how long? And if he gets taken down, can he get back up? These are the question marks for this fight. And we saw him get taken down by Damian Maia quite a few times. So a lot of people have speculated that, well, this was the old Jorge Masvidal, the new Street Judas, Street Jesus with the long hair, mullet, and the giant beard, and he's just angrier and meaner and more aggressive. He's not going to be able to get taken down. He's reinvented himself. The only change that I really see in Masvidal is he is much more aggressive than he used to be. If you see his old fights, he kind of just weighed on the outside, and he was a bit of a counter fighter. In his fights as of late, I mean, he is extremely, extremely aggressive. And I expect that same aggression when he fights Kamaru Usman, but Usman is so good at mixing up the takedowns, with the punches and kicks. You have no idea. Is he going to punch you in the head? Is he going to kick you in the stomach? Or is he going to shoot a takedown? And Kamaru Usman is lightning fast, has ridiculous cardio, and also has pretty dangerous striking of his own. I think he could hurt. Like, Jorge Masvidal does not respect Kamaru Usman's striking. He will pay for it. And I just don't... We haven't seen the big question mark, which is how good is Jorge Masvidal's takedown defense. The last time that anyone really shot a takedown on him was Damian Maia. And Kamaru Usman is a way better wrestler than Damian Maia. So I expect Kamaru Usman to be able to take him down. Is he going to be able to hold him down or not? I don't know, but I don't think it matters because Kamaru Usman has a freaking ridiculous gas tank. I mean, did you see how many times he took down Rafael Dos Anjos and Tyron Woodley? He could take Jorge Masvidal down 5 times every single round for the entire fight. So even if Jorge Masvidal is able to spring back up, I see him getting re-clinched, getting taken down again, and then when they're at striking range, he will at least be hesitant because he's going to have gotten taken down so many times before that. I see either unanimous victory win for Kamaru Usman, or possibly even like a late TKO in the 4th. I could see him wearing down. I mean, Kamaru Usman is no joke, and I mean, he hits really hard. I think he should have been just going up against some people with just ridiculous chins. I mean, you look at like Colby Covington. I mean, that guy can really take a shot. So can Tyron Woodley. So I mean, these guys that he's fighting are really, really hard to finish. And actually, I mean, he did finish Colby Covington late in that fight. So that kind of slipped my mind. I almost felt like it was a decision because I just remember it did go to the 5th round. But yeah, he ended up stopping him late. So I think it's going to be another late stoppage for Kamaru Usman. So give me your thoughts. What do you think? Are my picks completely off base? Am I crazy? Am I wrong about all my predictions? Or do you think that I'm actually onto something and that the people that I picked are actually going to walk out of UFC 251 with their hand raised? Let me know. Give me your thoughts. Subscribe. Like my video. And I will see you all next time.